Good evening. Welcome to this panel on research leadership, where we are going to start with some examples of where we have already seen some very high quality research being done in India, and then talk about how do we show more of research leadership out of India. Uh, Again, I mean, I think the stage is really set. We have a great deal of talent in India. We are also a nation which faces a lot of challenges as a nation, as a society, and all of these challenges or problems kind of become very interesting problems, right? That we can take on as researchers. Uh, we are also at this point where computing has become so powerful that we can apply uh, computing to so many different aspects of how the world is run. And while it's not always the panacea, typically for any problem you'll find, you will see that computing can play a very, very powerful enabling role in helping solve those problems. So to really shed more light on this topic, I have a very, very distinguished panel set of panelists who I'm going to now invite and introduce. So let me start with first Professor Sunita Sarawagi. She's a professor, chaired professor at IIT Bombay, and also leads the C-Mind Center. Um, uh, Sunita got her BTech in computer science from IIT Kharagpur and a PhD from UC Berkeley. In fact, I've had the pleasure of knowing Sunita since she was a grad student. Um, Sunita has also worked at Google Research, CMU, IBM Almaden Research Center. She recently received the very prestigious Infosys Prize that was in 2019 for her contributions to engineering and computer science. And she's also a recipient of a distinguished alumnus award from IIT Kharagpur. Sunita has several publications, including Best Paper Awards in some of the very top conferences like SIGMOD, VLDB, ICDM, NIPS, what is now known as NeurIPS, and ICML conferences. And she served on the board of directors of ACM KDD and so on. So all of our panelists are very accomplished people. So I'm going to be perhaps a bit brief because otherwise we can spend the entire time of the panel just reading out some of the accomplishments of our panelists. So welcome, Sunita. Uh, Next, let me welcome Dr. Pramod Verma, who's the CTO of EkStep Foundation, not for profit, creating learning centric, open source, digital public goods under Project Sunbird. Pramod also continues to be the chief architect of Aadhaar, India's digital identity program that has successfully covered over a billion people in a short span of 7 years. He's also helped architect various India stack layers such as eSign, Digital Locker, and UPI, Unified Payments Interface, and Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture. He's currently also involved in a very, very interesting effort. He's a co-founder of Beacon Foundation, the Genesis author and angel donor of the open source Beacon protocol for creation of decentralized open discovery, fulfillment, and commerce networks. Uh, Pramod also holds a master's and PhD in computer science. Again, he's passionate about technology, science, society, and teaching. So, welcome, Pramod. Next, let me introduce Dr. Pooja Rao, who until recently, Pooja was the head of research and development and co-founder of Cure.ai, a very successful medical imaging AI startup from Mumbai. Pooja is a physician by training. She received her MBBS in 2008. And then, after a neuroscience PhD at Max Planck Institute in Germany, she spent most of her career in applying machine learning to various healthcare problems such as genomics, medical records, and radiology. And it's our good fortune that Pooja now leads the health team at Google Research India. So, welcome, Pooja. And finally, and definitely not the least, let me introduce Professor Nitin Saxena, who's N. Rama Rao Chair Professor at Computer Science and Engineering Department at IIT Kanpur. Uh, Nitin holds a BTech in computer science from IIT Kanpur and a PhD with Dr. Manindra Agarwal. He's broadly interested in computational complexity theory, algebra, and number theory. He's been a visiting grad student at Princeton, NUS Singapore, and a postdoc at CWI Amsterdam and Vaughan Junior Fellow. Um, since April 2013, Nitin has been in the faculty at IIT Kanpur. What he doesn't mention in his bio is also that he's a co-author of that famous "Primes Isn't P" paper, which is again, I mean, one of the major research accomplishments out of India. So it's really great to have you also on the panel. So it's just amazing to see such a highly accomplished group of panelists. So I'm going to ask each of you first to perhaps share a few opening thoughts. And in particular, I would like you to talk about, I know all of you, especially Sunita, I know you tend to be very, very modest, but please indulge me and tell me about your own favorite work, right? Which is kind of your own work that you really like. And then you can also talk about some other work, some other research that you really like, but perhaps start with something of your own work that you're really proud of, that you really enjoyed doing that work. So let's start with Sunita.
Yeah, thank you, Manish. So actually, I will talk about the work which I felt provided some amount of kind of leadership. Not necessarily the work that I liked in terms of its technical depth, but which came a bit ahead of its time. So this is the work that I did in data cleaning. So when I came to India as an assistant professor, I wanted to work on some India relevant problem, and I was fortunate to meet some really forward thinking people in the Ministry of Information Technology, who got me introduced to this problem of address deduplication. And I thought it was a trivial problem which could be just solved as a class project, and I realized the non-triviality of it. That got me into active learning, and we created this software called Alias, which I think it impacted at least the research. And Boeing, for example, they contacted us from Seattle. They wanted to use this software to deduplicate their equipments in their inventory database. And then simultaneously I got interested in trying to clean Indian addresses. Again, this problem was introduced to me by a startup in Pune. They just thought that, hey, here is this young prof who has come, let me throw at them some problems that we have been struggling with. And again, initially, I felt that it was a simple problem. They were anyway using rules, and I thought, okay, I'll just indulge them. That time there was plenty of time. So, I just then I found that this is actually extremely interesting, and that got me into CRFs. And that kind of basically totally kind of put me in this track of trying to use statistical machine learning for difficult problems of data cleaning, information deduplication, and information extraction.
No, that's in fact, Sunita, you were really ahead of your time, because many, many years after, right, you did this work. I remember when I moved to India, I was with IBM Research, and one of the most successful projects, at least to date, during my tenure, I mean, in the first maybe, let's say, 15 years of IBM Research, was this project on data cleaning, right? Where again, there were researchers like LVS and so on, right, who were working on, again, address and name deduplication. And in fact, that led to all of these observations also on the challenges of dealing with noisy data. So in fact, that became like IBM used to come out with these global technology trends. And in fact, LVS kind of created the slide. And many years later, kind of, I remember seeing these slides on where analysts were talking about the 4 V's of big data. And the slide that they were using was the one that LVS had presented, because he had talked about this fourth V, veracity, which I believe was really a contribution from India, talking about that veracity challenge in big data. A great example. And we'll come back to you to hear some more thoughts. But again, I mean, I think your work was really ahead of its time. And later, the research community woke up, right, to many of the challenges and so on, right, that still sometimes even, I mean, even today, right, you continue to see more work being done on some of these problems. So with that, let me invite Pramod to share some of his thoughts and some of his kind of contributions. In fact, I will note, let me just for the audience, uh, there's an exercise right now being commissioned by the Indian National Academy of Engineering, where INAE is summarizing the top 75 engineering accomplishments of independent India in our 75 years of independence. And I know Pramod is associated and has played a very key role in at least three of them. I know about Aadhaar, the UPI, as well as kind of these open learning repositories of content. But let's hear from Pramod, right? What are some of kind of your work that you're really justifiably proud of, which has had that impact, and kind of any other thoughts you would like to share with the audience?
Thank you, Manish. Pleasure to be here. Very privileged, by the way. By the panel is extremely accomplished. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a practicing accomplished researcher at all.
You can see the
But
level of modesty amongst the panelists, but please
no,
continue.
I'm a practicing architect, been in the computing domain for 25 plus years. But I want to talk about definitely the two projects that we were, as India, never attempted in the world. That kind of scale was Aadhaar, which is providing deduplicated unique, and Sunita talked about deduplicated unique identity for 1 billion people. And of course, UPI was, from outside, it might look like simply a mobile payment. But even Google, by the way, recommended to feds in the US that Google, UPI is a golden architectural standard that they should adopt because it's never been done. A 4-party transaction never been done. Real time money transfer from any currency. So with Aadhaar, the computing challenge was one part, but non-computing challenge was equally overwhelming. It had all the things that written in his starting point that it's going to fail. So from a computing point of view, though, I can tell you that basically the essence of the problem was that Indians, more than half of Indians, didn't have birth certificate or birth documents at all. So there is no foundational documents in India, and that makes it extremely hard to deduplicate and create a unique identifier. Identity itself is, it's yours, and you have name, date of birth, and address, and so on. And most of the people didn't have date of birth. So we had to find a way to deduplicate 1 billion people. And that was an n-squared problem. And you had to compare everyone to everyone as they enrolled. And we had to use biometrics, fingerprint, facial photograph, and iris as a mechanism. And the multi-model biometrics at that scale, the largest in the world, was the US visit system. When you enter US, you provide your fingerprint, right? And that was 150 million. And we were looking at 10x. And the 10x is not linear. It's non-linear, as all of you know, because you're comparing everyone to everyone. But, and the most, including Professor Anil Jain and people who have been working in the, biometric space, pretty much told us it's going to be unviable. You will need millions of parallel processing computers to achieve what you're trying to achieve, because you're going to do 1,000 trillion matches every day, maybe more, to get to that. And it's not going to be viable, economically viable. You're going to spend billions of dollars, and it's not a government project. It's a government project, right? So India is frugal, and we can't spend that kind of money either. And the largest similar digital identity system was about 150 pounds in the UK per person. So, and we didn't have that kind of budget. So we were also looking at a combination of how do you create an architecture that is open, cost effective, but can do 1 billion people. But the best part was we bet on open source. We bet on open computing. We never used any proprietary chipsets or parallel computing systems. At that time, GPU was just coming up, by the way. It was 2009. We could have used, we are using now, but before that, we were not using it. And we went all out, inspired mostly by folks like you in Google and everywhere, who has shown that open source and commodity computing does work, provided you can parallelize the hell out of the system and really build that architecture. So the numbers were staggering. We were enrolling 1 million people at peak, 1.5 million people every day. That's like Singapore in 4 days, Australia in 20 days. You think of that country scale, right? We were enrolling 1.5 million people every day. That actually meant 1.5 million people had to be their biometrics, 10 fingerprints, iris, and face, and the address and the name, of course, a little bit of fuzzy matching of that, had to be done with everybody in the database so far. So as the database kept growing into 200 million people, 200 million people, at 300 million people, we were comparing 1.5 million people every day. And that was the real challenge. But the best part, in 6.5 years, and in 4.5 years, we reached billion, and 6.5 years, we reached 1.2 billion, and we are at 1.33 billion people. Deduplicated digital identity, and we do 1 billion online authentication, digital authentication every month on that system. Completely built on open source, completely built on commodity computing, completely built on 2 data centers that are 3,000 square feet or each. That's the word. High available. We do about 15 terabytes of data we had to deal with, but I think many of the work you guys have all done, I think, inspired us as architects who are practitioners to bet on the direction of the computing that's taking. So I think continue to do what you do and continue to push for that. And UPI is another story where we have payments moving across 4 parties and so on, right? It just computing challenges primarily comes down to society. Usage for India was enormous, and so thank you for all your contribution as well.
Thanks, Pramod, and thank you for your contribution, which has, for instance, UPI, which has made India the leader today in digital payments. I was reading your write-up that we are already, as of December of last year, we were at 4.5 billion UPI transactions per month, and each of these transactions costing only a few paise, thanks to the architectural choices that have been made. So again, thanks for all the leadership work that you have been doing, and I know you're not quite done. You continue to push for kind of like opening up e-commerce and so on. So again, all the best to you in all of these wonderful efforts. So with that, let me now turn to Pooja, who has been, again, a very, very successful both scientist and an entrepreneur, where she has taken some of these ideas from research into production, and I might say achieved greater success than I've seen even at Google with all of the work on health AI. So Pooja, if you could take us through some of your achievements and any kind of learnings and thoughts you have on this topic.
Thanks, Manish. You're far too kind. We still have a very, very long way to go. So until recently, I was at a startup called Cure.ai, based in Bombay, where we had a bunch of early successes, as Manish was saying, in the field of AI in healthcare, specifically medical imaging, so AI for radiology. We were somewhat early to this problem, starting relatively early, starting 2016. So we developed deep learning models that would look for things like tuberculosis, lung nodules on chest x-rays, or bleeds in brain CTs. This sort of thing is fairly common now, but we started early. So even as a 10-person startup, we were really, really keen on publishing. We were really keen on clinical validation. So in 2018, we were one of the first sort of groups that, even as a small company, were able to publish in the Lancet, which was a top-tier medical journal. So it was like a huge achievement for us at that point of time. couple of years later, we went through to getting US FDA clearances to deploy this globally, as well as other regulatory clearances in the world. So as of now, it's the products are sort of deployed in, they process on the order of thousands of scans every day. They're deployed in about 30 countries, and of course, India is one of them. I do consider this a success story so far, but really our point of view on this was that we happened to be in India while we were trying to do research or build for the world, right? So while we were doing this work, we had never thought of the product really in an India-specific context, but many of the advantages of doing research in India just embedded themselves into the product somehow. They just did. And there are tremendous advantages to doing research in India, which I want to point out. One, of course, is a huge amount of talent. The other one, clearly, the huge amount of data, scale, endless amount of diverse, challenging problems. But I think even more than all of these are all well known. I think more than all of these, one of the biggest advantages that doing research from India gives you is that everything is in hard mode or extra challenging mode. So internet connections are poor, data quality is low, cameras are bad, sensors are less effective, all of that, right? Resources are scarce, multiple languages, lots of different socioeconomic contexts, you name it, right? But this also sort of makes it a very excellent test bed for developing products and doing research. So in a sense that if you've developed an innovation and tested it in India, it's very, very likely that it's going to work globally because you've already solved many of the hardest problems. So I think in some sense, it's like a unique privilege to be able to learn, do research in India, because one gets a unique perspective on these problems that somebody finding somewhere else, sitting in an environment of plenty, would find it difficult to grasp. So if one can use, I think, that perspective to solve global problems, then I think we're sitting there in that sweet spot of being successful.
Thanks, Pooja. And now let me turn to Nitin to share some of his talk about some of his work. And by the way, I learned this very interesting factor recently, that when Nitin did his some of the work, foundational work, right, that led to that famous result, which again, I mean, you almost ask any researcher what are some of the key kind of let's say research accomplishment, right, that have come out of India, and I'm sure Primes is in P would be high, almost everybody's list. So Nitin got a grade of B in his BTech project that led to where some of that foundational work was done for that work. So he didn't let that B grade and the kind of all of the naysaying from some of the influential professors bother him, and continued pursuing, right, that bold goal. And the rest, as they know, as they say, is history. So again, a very interesting, a very useful lesson for, I think, all of the students. But let me turn it over to you, Nitin, to share some of your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. So yeah, I'm really overawed by the amount of practical work, the work of practical importance and scientific importance that the panelists here do. Unfortunately, I cannot claim any of this. So I have very little experience in practical work, or my work becoming practical and solving problems for, forget about billions, even 100 people. So I haven't solved anything of that scale for humanity. But yeah, my interest always has been in mathematical structures, and especially to do with algebra, and number theory has been my kind of both interest and hobby and passion since childhood. Although when I was young, I didn't do much in number theory. I was just interested in reading as much as I can. It was only when I was doing my BTech that I got more seriously into math and number theory and algebra. And by the end of my BTech, and between end of BTech and starting PhD, we were able to solve, both with Neeraj and Mani, this problem of primality, which has been defined for thousands of years, and it was formalized in the form that we solved only, I think, in the 1900s, but still a problem which was 100 to 1000 years old. So the problem was, I mean, as you can guess from the name, that if you are given a number, can you test whether it is a prime number or not, whether it has non-trivial factors or not. For example, 3, 7, 11 cannot be factored, but 12 can be factored, and so on. Now, this by definition is a trivial problem, but it became interesting actually with computing. So the reason why we got famous is again because of the computing angle in it. It has always been a nice mathematical problem, but what computing asks, and especially what happened in cryptography, in crypto systems, is that prime numbers became the source of both easiness and hardness. So all the crypto systems, all these banking transactions, and perhaps also in UPI apps, if you need security, in WhatsApp, for example, if you need security, you use what is called the RSA crypto system, and that uses and also HTTPS has standardized RSA. So it uses prime numbers to get the security. It basically what it does is that it multiplies two primes, which becomes a composite, and the primes are now hidden. So your browser and everything actually works only with the composite, and it is presumed that you cannot get back the prime numbers unless somebody gives you the prime numbers. You cannot break the number apart. So that is the basic security paradigm on which all this trillion-dollar industry or the modern economy is based. So there is a very big motivation to study primes in this context. And I should confess here that actually already fast algorithms are known. So whatever people want to do with prime numbers, when we solved it or when we were working on it, already there were industry grade algorithms that can test for primality, that can find prime numbers, which is why RSA was being used. But there was this theoretical curiosity, there was this major interest in understanding that whether you can do it, whether you can solve the problem completely. Now, I wouldn't want to define here what does complete solution mean, or what does a complete algorithm mean for primality, but that was an open question for a long time, and we solved that. We solved that by using methods of algorithms and algebra. And yeah, so that was obviously a major breakthrough, both for the area of science and math, but also, I guess, for the Indian researchers, because this was really a famous problem which was solved completely in India with no foreign influence whatsoever. I mean, Madin had been working on it by himself for 3-4 years before us, and we were just merely BTech students here, inexperienced and probably foolish. So we were able to solve it within IIT Kanpur system, within the Indian system. So I guess it was a big confidence breakthrough, not only for us, but also for general Indians. And I'm saying this from experience. Actually, the amount of emails and congratulatory messages from Indians that we got from abroad was huge. I mean, we were getting like a mail every minute, even in those days when Google was not big and email was not big and so on, for 20 years ago, exactly. Yeah, so with that kind of starting point, I have continued to delve deeper and deeper in such theoretical constructions. And these theoretical constructions usually come from the practical questions which people have studied, modeled, and probably solved in the industry. But then we want to see the math, or I want to see the math behind it and develop appropriate algebraic structures, appropriate number theory structures and complexity questions. And it goes in various directions. So it has applications in cryptography, but also in error correcting codes. Some may have even applications in modeling data, how to store it, how to work with it. But yeah, as I frankly said before, I am not aware of any big applications, or I have not myself done practical applications. So I wouldn't claim that. I will only take the credit for the math which I develop and I'm interested in. Thank you.
So thanks, Nitin, for making that small contribution of solving this open problem for several hundred years. There will be enough lesser mortals, right, who'll figure out how to get some use out of your contributions. So I hope the students in the audience are inspired by real-world examples of true leadership that has come out of researchers based right here, solving those problems right here. But moving on, there are so many factors, right, that go into showing leadership. There's this issue of talent, infrastructure, funding, kind of ecosystem involving academia and research. So let me again ask Sunita, I mean, what are some of those factors that kind of go into research leadership? What would be your views of what are those things that we should strengthen further, and where do you think kind of there are again opportunities, right, for us to do even better?
So actually, this is a topic on which I kind of feel very strongly. I feel where we need to strengthen ourselves is in our confidence. I see many young people, we don't have confidence to tackle hard problems that we believe are the right problems to solve. I think before we even talk about funding and collaboration and PR and all those things, I just want people to kind of talk to the end users, see so I think the biggest enabler for success, for researchers at least, for practical researchers, is to have early access to problems. And for that, you cannot look at the related work of papers and solve problems. These days we have lots of papers. Everybody is just having this mad rush of publishing papers on archive. And I find most of the papers are just such deltas. I just really wish that people had the confidence. And I'm not saying that I'm not prey to it, but I think we just need to kind of take this break and really, think about the difficult problems that we want to solve and be willing to take a pause on meeting the archive targets and live with the low latency and actually solve those problems. Once that is done, the rest will follow.
Thank you,
Funding,
Sunita.
missionary work, everything else will fall in place. The most important thing is that people have to solve the right problems. You need to have taste. You cannot just write the next paper.
Thank you so much, Sunita, for stating this, because I couldn't agree with you more. Whenever I've been kind of in discussions and so on, I remember I've been in discussions where people talk about infrastructure issues, funding issues, and so on, which are, nice. And I've always stated that, to me, the biggest barrier that I think that holds us back is that that we are not bold enough. So I think if we are bold enough and if we go after the right problems, right? So sometimes, often even the advice that I give to young researchers who join the lab, they probably get sick of me saying the same thing. But again, the uniform advice that I give to all the young researchers is don't pick problems that you believe you can solve, right? Because often that's the tendency, that's the kind of mindset, right, that we have as young initially, right, kind of young researchers. Let me read a paper. Oh, there are some kind of limitations of this work, and I know through my expertise I can fix those limitations, and let me do that work. So instead of picking problems, right, that you can solve, pick problems that are worth solving, right? Pick problems that really matter. So Sunita, thanks for talking about that as having that right taste. So I think problems that are worth solving, and be bold. Just because the problem looks impossible, uh, don't give up, right? Don't say, oh, I'm not going to solve that problem. Nitin didn't say, oh, this problem, nobody has solved this problem for the last 100 years. How am I going to solve this problem? He took that problem on, right? Pramod didn't say, oh, it has never been done, right? This deduplication of 1 billion people against each other, it's not been done, right? And always there are naysayers who will say, look, this can't be done. Have that healthy disregard for the impossible. Go and pursue those problems, right, that look impossible, and the rest will follow. So thank you so much, Sunita, for stating this so crisply. Let me ask another question, right? So India, we believe, right, is uniquely positioned to take on leadership role because of some of the uniqueness of problems that the local context inspired, right? And the sheer scale that we have. Anytime you're solving a problem, right, for people, India has over 1 billion people, right? You will see the kind of scale, right, that hasn't been seen anywhere else except for maybe China. So maybe I'll ask Pramod and Pooja to comment on that aspect, right? So how do we utilize that kind of context, that environment, right, to really do leadership work out of India? And what are some of the challenges that you face?
Do you want me to go first? Or
Yeah. So Pramod, if you could
okay.
start.
Yeah. So as Pooja was saying, India is brilliantly but crazily diverse country, and the diversity of our country is like a continent, right? All of us actually probably speak different languages, diversity in every way, financial, economic, food, culture, everything. That actually means that if you solve for India, you pretty much solve for the world, because it's an extremely complex and diverse situation we have always faced with. This is the opportunity, and the opportunity is that precisely is that technology, and you're all in computing and technology is a brilliant tool to democratize access to products and services and information access already through internet and so on, now democratizing it. But products and services is not being democratized. So I can tell you, in 2010, India only had sub 20% people who were banking. This is 2010. This was already, smartphones were already out, like 10 years ago, right? Country was going, we had less than 20% of the people who were in banking. We were always after the holy grail of financial inclusion. And according to the recent published BIS, Bureau of International Settlements, Central Bank of Central Banks, their report from Basel says we would have taken 46 years, according to them, to get to from 20% to 80%, which is sort of considered the universal financial inclusion. India took 6 years. We compressed 4 decades of development cycle. From, instead of 26 years, we took in 6 years, we reached from 20. By 2018, we were 85% banking, and now 95% banking, mostly women having bank account. 2 advantages we did. So really, one, India is still a huge, a lot of government subsidy, $50 billion we spend on subsidies and scholarships and women empowerment and farmers and work and everything else, right? Directly go to women's account now, bank account. We cut all the intermediaries directly to the people. We do the world's largest direct cash transfer program. And the money rails we built, I can tell you the cost of identity, by the way, was 150 pounds in the UK. It was expected that Obama report said about $100 if you do a digital identity in India, in the US, and we did it in $1. So Aadhaar's cost was $1 per person, US dollar. All cost, technology, people, data center, salaries, enrollment, everything. And authentication cost is 10 paise. That is for 1/700th of a dollar. I don't know what 10 paise, roughly. Yeah, that's it. That's all the cost. And a UPI cost, Manish was reading, and Manish was saying, really, we are doing 4 billion transactions. The cost is actually sub 10 paise. So it's so small. And that I was speaking to W3C payments in here in MIT, and they were saying $1,700 is pretty much free. So your payment rails and identity, when that happens, 2 things happen. When you apply technology and computing at population scale to dramatically reduce cost of transactions, cost of engagement, cost of trust. Half the time we don't trust anything. So people have to repeatedly fill form, repeatedly do the same thing, especially the bottom of the society pyramid, right? Top of the pyramid, people like us, top 100 million people are very easy. We can say, I'm an engineer, I work in Google, and your claims are verifiable quite easily. Most people struggle to say who they are, what they do, and and most people are good, but the inability to verify their claims means very, very low trust in the system. So if a small SME, small entrepreneur, micro entrepreneur, or a gig worker walks into a bank and say, I need a vehicle loan, they'll say, screw you, I'm not going to give you, because I don't know you. I don't know what you do. I have no proof of what you do. I don't know how much you earn. I don't trust you. The problem is that the parallel economy was thriving, and the money lenders and all that thing. So fundamentally, we've closed that gap. We closed the gap by using computing technologies, using technologies that are available to us, dramatically reduced cost of trust and cost of engagement. But we did not solve Aadhaar, UPI, all did not solve any societal problem. It enabled everyone else to solve. So I think a lot of us, what we do is distributing the ability to solve. distributing the ability to solve to whom? People like you. That means India is setting up these rails, digital backbone or digital rails that opens up open data. It opens up personal data with consent. We are the first country who is offering machine readable, digitally verifiable, data structures with consent. That means financial data, health data, and so on with your consent. Real-time APIs, open protocol-based APIs that are all meant that innovators like you or researchers like you are looking. If you're working in India, you are actually now a perfect time to say, oh, we have language data, health data, education data, both personal data and open data with appropriate privacy controls and so consent and so on, are available for you to be able to leverage it. And the cost of doing that has plummeted. When the cost happens, innovation thrives. That's where we are seeing entrepreneurs innovating, researchers can innovate, and I urge researchers to do not ignore the exponential data explosion that's going to happen in data. And India's data-driven innovation is going to override anything else we have seen so far. So in the coming years, our data-driven innovation is going to be so big, and is going to be completely open API-based, machine-readable data that's coming out that you would really feel missed out if you're not being part of that. Okay, so I encourage you to jump in, whether you're in health, whether you're in finance, payment, Indic languages, jump in and actually participate. So we are in a very good times for us to be able to get research going. And I really urge all of you to do not sit and assume a non-linear change won't happen. And it's like they say, right? Nothing happens for a while and everything happens suddenly, right? At one shot, everything happens. That's what we saw with payment, identity, payment, everything else in India. And the moment of data has just opened up in the last 2 years, and it's going to explode. Who is going to play? Only time will tell. Entrepreneurs will play, researchers will play. So please participate. And your help is very much needed in 3 areas: entrepreneurial energy, research energy, and open source energy. We do a lot of work on open source, on data and APIs and so on. And we need a lot of research work, obviously cutting edge, because nobody has done any of this in the world. So we just have to, and we can't wait for private companies to solve it. We have to solve it societally. And the third is entrepreneurship. Nothing like innovation for a diverse country like India. No single app can solve our healthcare problem. No single app can solve our education problem. We need lots of people to work together to solve that. So please do.
Thanks, Pramod, for this very inspirational message. We should have really scheduled this panel for at least an hour and a half. We are already kind of at time, but I'm going to just take my privilege as a moderator to extend it by a few minutes. I'm going to ask Pooja to chip in with some additional thoughts on this problem, and then I'm going to ask a question to Nitin, from the audience.
So I couldn't really have said it better than what Pramod did, but there's a couple of quick notes that I'd like to add to it, which is when we talk about problems that are inspired by the scale, the diversity of India, we tend to focus on things like education, healthcare, sort of these very basic, scarcity, sort of, inexpensive, low resource kinds of problems. And those are certainly important. We definitely have to tackle them. But I think that we shouldn't shy away from longer term, more ambitious things which require more investment, things like, backbones, infrastructures, protocols, the kinds of things that you're talking about, as well as even much more ambitious things like space research, biotech, all of that, right? I think these are all open games. So I would really hesitate to say that one should sort of, restrict oneself to a set of India specific or, India inspired problems. So I leave it at that. Thanks, Manish.
Okay, so I see a question from the students. We see a large outflux of students from top institutions of India to pursue PhD abroad, mostly US, CS. What do you think are the reasons for that? How would you compare the PhD programs in India, US, Europe, and opportunities after a PhD? So let me ask Nitin to share his view. Then maybe I'll ask Sunita to add, and then I can add my perspective.
Hello, Manish. I think your screen froze. Could you repeat that again?
Okay, sorry. If you couldn't hear, we see this large outflux of students from top institutions of India to pursue PhD programs abroad.
Okay. Yeah.
What are the reasons, and how would you compare the PhD programs in India with those in US and Europe?
Yeah.
If you could
Sure.
share your views, and I'd
Yeah.
also like Sunita to share her views on that.
Yeah. So I see this question. It has been asked since my BTech days. I myself was asking these questions, and I myself had applied for PhD to do PhD in US universities and so on. I think it is not a bad thing. I ultimately actually would not say that this is completely dependent on the research area of your interest, but it is also to do with this general nature of human beings that they want to explore a different place. So I think if usually what happens is that if you have studied in one place, you have lived in one place, and you are ambitious and you are outgoing, you simply want to explore a different country. Maybe if you cannot go to a different country, you want to go to a different institute within India, or you want to go to a different state. And I think that is part of the process of growing, and the young people want to explore different cultures. So I think that is a thing which we cannot really stop, and we should not even try to give a recommendation that okay, the most of the PhD candidates should live in India, they should not be allowed to go abroad, or they should not go abroad. If they go abroad, it's bad. So I think we cannot put it in that framework. We cannot frame it that way. I would say that students in India, Indian students who are ready to do a PhD and they are finishing their BTech or masters, they should sincerely think whether there is a research environment conducive to their growth in India, and if there is, then they should probably try that. They should try to stay in India. They should go to that university, go to that professor specifically. Because if that environment is available here in India, I don't think it will make much of a difference if you leave this and go to the US. So if you already have a research personality who is famous and you are interested in his or her area and work is going on, there is a research group, then actually you cannot, it's always naive to say that no, this is not enough, I have to do the same thing in the US. So you should be very careful about what your peers are saying. Your peers will say that no, if I'm in New York, it will be far better. Or if I'm in Princeton, it will be far better. So that actually you should always take with a pinch of salt. It's not true, and you really have to experience both the environments to do a fair comparison. Yeah. On the other hand, if the area in which you are interested in some research problem in math or computer science, or you are interested in doing engineering at a large scale, and you see that that is not happening in India, but it is happening somewhere else, let's say it is happening in Europe or in the US, then sure, then I think you should try to learn that. And if later on you want to come back, you're homesick, or you want to contribute to India's development, you should come back and try to set up a group here when you are more experienced. So that I think makes sense. It's fair to do that. But yeah, the previous thing which I said also, you should weigh in. If you already it's happening in India, you should be part of that. There is no reason to just change the environment and think that you will do better in some other country.
Sunita, would you like to add?
Actually, I kind of share Nitin's viewpoint. I never try to persuade my students to stay back and do a PhD with me. I feel young people should move around, do whatever. I don't want to have too many layers and, moralities about their action. People should do whatever their heart and mind tells them. And, they can always come back to India. They can do entrepreneurship. They can join as faculty. Why burden 20-year-olds with all these, oh, you should stay in India for your country. Just do whatever is best for you.
Thanks. And there was this question. Another part of this question was, do students who pursue a PhD in India have an equal opportunity after a PhD in India versus a US university? So certainly I can talk about Google research. Yes, we look at the quality of your work, and we have seen plenty of students doing their PhD again with the likes of Sunita, Shoman, and so many amazing researchers who are based in India, and we absolutely kind of prioritize them, right, over not so like again high quality PhD, right, that we see even from US universities and so on. This is not to say that there's any kind of moral judgment that yes, I agree with both Sunita and Nitin that you should really stay on in India. All we are saying is it ultimately boils down to the quality of the work that you're doing. And to me, again, one key determinant in that quality of work is being bold, right, and attacking the right kind of problems. If I look back upon what did I gain out of my PhD, I mean, I did all of my like undergraduate and PhD, right, in the pre-World Wide Web days, right, which was a very different world. And if I reflect back, the biggest thing that I got out of my PhD, out of going to the US, and that I got out of my PhD was that confidence that yes, I mean, I can take on problems that and kind of somehow come up with a reasonable solution, right? Because initially, even the thought of doing a PhD was very daunting. What if I can't come up with any new ideas and never end up finishing my PhD? So just the and one of the things that I saw again from the US people in the US, including people of Indian origin, right, in the US who were being very successful, is that they were aiming much bigger, right, than some of our own people, right, were back in India. Because sometimes maybe we kind of set too many kind of shackles on our own thinking. Oh, we are a country with fewer resources. We don't have as much funding. Therefore, we shouldn't be aiming high enough, right? So I think the biggest thing that I got out of my PhD outside India is that boldness, that confidence. And now when you see faculty right here, right, in India, like Sunita, Nitin, who are embodying that boldness, I think you can get a very world-class experience right here. But again, that's not to say you should only do a PhD in India. Go wherever, right, your heart takes you. Go and explore the world. That can also be very healthy. And it's all a personal choice. So again, we have really gone over, but again, I have really enjoyed kind of all of these amazing insights from all of the panelists. It's been kind of, at least for me, a really, really enjoyable session. And I hope it was for our audience as well. And again, I'd like to sincerely thank all of the panelists for sharing their thoughts, their pearls of wisdom, and hopefully inspiring the students, right, who are all watching this. And I look forward to then in the future, right, hearing back, right, from some of the students, right, at panels like these in the future, right, where some of these students can be talking about their major accomplishments. And hopefully you got a little bit of that inspiration to do that amazing work at this panel. So thank you all. And with that, let's bring this to a closure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It was
Thank you.
it was a privilege to be with you. Thank you. To meet you all. Bye.
Likewise.